The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Side Project Live are not necessarily those of LRN.FM, Tuieville, the Illinois Libertarian Party, and a bunch of other people.
We'd like to invite you and all the members of your household
to gather around and join us now
for a very special episode of
Side Project Live. And what's so special about it?
I'm not wearing any pants.
We're very, you've heard about the controversies within the bill, the process about the bill, one of the items. I don't know.
Crank it up, Jimmy.
Wow, we can't hear that. Hold on.
Crank that up, Jimmy.
Let's do it from over here.
There we go.
We're very, you've heard about the controversies within the bill, the process about the bill, one of the items. But I don't know if you have heard that it is a legislation for the future. Not just about health care for America, but about a healthier America, where preventive care is not something that you have to pay a deductible for or out of pocket. That prevention. It's about diet, not diabetes. It's going to be very, very exciting. But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it, away from the fog of the controversy.
Away from the fog. You mean the away from the fog of Congress? No, that can't be it. Hey,
good morning once again.
Welcome everybody to another side-splitting, action-packed episode of the Side Project Live. Once again, Morris, Illinois, Jimmy G.
Hi there from Lockport, Illinois. It's Eric Ferguson, and there she is again. Woohoo! It's not the first. This is not the first time.
Whoa, hold on. There's other stuff going on in the background. I forget that YouTube automatically plays through the next video sometimes.
Playlists, gotta watch out for the playlist. There's a setting for that.
But I'm just too lazy to find it.
There you go. There's not her first time. She's done this before. You have to pass it to find out what's in it.
Yeah, and sadly, seems to be more of a common thread lately because of the recent net neutrality thing. They passed it without actually releasing the document. In fact, I don't think it's still released. I took a quick look on Google earlier about the about that particular document, and I couldn't find anywhere to say that they actually released it. They just basically said it'll do this, 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 and this, but they didn't release the details. Yeah. And here in the Chicago area, there's a new commercial by that crook Rahm Emanuel running for office in Chicago. I hate the fact that I don't live anywhere near Chicago. Well, I live near Chicago, but I'm still getting those damn ads, even though they don't affect me. But that's a topic for a different time. But he's running a commercial against his competitor, who pretty much just as bad, except he's got one good thing for him. He wants to totally end the red light camera program in Chicago.
Yeah, which is just feel-good nonsense.
Right. Oh, just anything did.
Yeah, you might want them to go away, but it's just a feel-good issue. It doesn't mean anything real.
Exactly. But in this particular ad, they're playing a clip from Rahm's opponent's guy named Chuy Garcia.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, wrong Chewy.
Not that kind of Chewy. It's a pretty common name.
And and they show a clip from the Channel 2 News here in Chicago, which I actually thought that was illegal in political advertisements. But as long as they say, "Oh, I support this," I guess it's okay. But they say that in this ad, the political pundits are saying that. He hasn't released Chuy Garcia hasn't released an economic plan. He says vote for me and just trust me, and I'm like, how can we have an informed electorate if we're told that we can't have the details ahead of time? I mean, overall this was supposed to be the most transparent administration in history, and the members of Congress, when the health care thing was passed, only had 72 hours to read it. And what was it, like 2,100, 2,200 pages long? So it was horrible.
Well, and see, and that's the worst part about it. That's the United States Code portion, and there are a lot of big deal was made about that. It's 2,000 pages long and builds all these new agencies stuff. Yeah, but that's only in the United States Code portion of it. There's another 8,000 pages in the Code of Federal Regulations as a result of it. When it opens these new branches, and the White House gets to decide how they're going to enforce the new law.
And if they can't be fussed to read the 2,000 pages, how can we expect them to read the whole 10,000 pages? Heck, I couldn't make it through. I barely made it 100 pages into Atlas Shrugged before I gave up. So how was anybody going to expect this? And one time I read the Bible cover to cover in a year, and that was a slog. I mean, if you're having a hard time with that, then what the heck's the deal with all these other bills? We can't expect them to read them. And then on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't actually release the bill to the public on what was it, Thomas.gov, I think it is, or Thomas.loc.gov, the Library of Congress, which is the clearinghouse for all that website. It's the clearinghouse for all the legislation coming out. They didn't even release it until after the vote. Right. Didn't the president say he was going to have every piece of bill up on the internet for people to view for 7 days before the vote?
Yeah, they hurried it through so quickly that, because they only publish the stuff on the web when they get around to processing it, and it takes a few days, and understandably, it takes a few days. I mean, it was 2,000 pages, but even beyond that, when it's one page, it takes time to get that, through to people's hands and key things in and all that. Okay, fine. So it takes a couple of days to publish it. They sat up all night and voted on it, and when it's done before you get it, the people that live here, the ones that it governs over, before you have a chance to read it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the idea of having like a clearinghouse for all of this stuff up there is it's a great idea. It's actually become quite handy in some of my searches. But if they're not going to utilize it, they're not going to let us know what's going on. If they're not going to let us know what's going on, then why bother having it? Before I go on any further, I'm going to do something I normally forget to do here while I'm thinking about it. If you want to contact the show, it's 815-200-4912 for our voicemail. You can tweet us at TheSideProject2. You can use the hashtag TSPLive. You can email us at sideproject2@gmail, and we do, as always, have the Q&A feature open, so if you got any questions or anything you want to ask us, and it doesn't even have to be on topic, you can ask us just about anything, hit us up. I remember our very first show on Radio Fubar, we actually got a call from somebody who was a frequent caller to all of the shows on Radio Fubar, and he was more or less a prank caller. And, we didn't even realize it at the time, but
why break tradition? Why not?
Why break tradition? Yeah, and we actually haven't had much in the way of calls since then. But
we got a message from Lek too. He's trying to log in, but he's Google Hangouts for him is being a butt, and it was for me this morning on mobile. But that's a couple times in a row now. The mobile version, I don't use it now, but when you call me first thing in the morning. And I'm still making coffee and stuff, I'll answer it on the phone or whatever. And it hasn't had any picture or sound lately. It's been weird. Lower thirds don't work. All these technical goofball things. I don't know.
What browser did you say you were using? You were using...
I have it in Firefox. It works in everything. Yeah, it works in everything, though. I mean, it works in Safari and all kinds of stuff. I mean, they did make it for, kudos to Google on this one for making it cross-platform, where they usually... hoard everything. Well, you got to install Chrome or it's not going to work. I don't like Chrome. Give me a break. But so they try to.
I personally like Chrome, but you can't even. I think I've mentioned before. Chrome was actually based on a Linux browser, Chromium, and then Google took that over. Since that was open source, they kind of expanded it and used it. And that's another reason why that you do all this stuff on Linux as well. I mean, that was a great strategy.
Yeah. Well, as a browser plugin, it can easily be cross-platform as long as the application kit is available for all the stuff. That's the other thing that Google doesn't do is they don't release that stuff. So that's my favorite plugins getting off on a tech tangent, my favorite plugins in Firefox don't work in Chrome because they can't work in Chrome. It's just, it's a frustrating thing. There, it looks like Lex trying to get into us.
There he is. Hey, so Google Hangouts being a butt for Lex too.
Yeah, there you go. There was a point to this topic we began, not just to pick on Nancy Pelosi, but there's more. They do. This is not.
But you got to admit, though. You got to admit, picking on Nancy Pelosi is fun.
It's really fun.
She's such a damn easy target. I mean, her and then her husband, who's got this millions and sweet, who's a real estate investor, and he's got millions and sweet sweetheart real estate deals from the government. I mean, you gotta love it.
Well, the minimum wage increase, when the last federal minimum wage went through, they decided, well, we're going to do it for everybody, not just the states, but our territories and our protectorates, and everybody's going to be covered, except American Samoa. Really? I wonder why that is. And then you discover there's a cannery there that she owns. Oops.
Oh.
She's I don't own it outright, but like major stockholder in Dole, and they make pineapple there or some whatever. I remember the details, but yeah. So it applies to absolutely everybody everywhere except her.
And this is why I want to join the Illuminati.
Good morning, Lack.
Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, what happened? I had to delete the app and reinstall it, and then it worked fine for some reason. Really odd.
Isn't that goofy?
But,
are you on an iPhone, or are you? This is on your laptop, or are you on your phone?
No, I'm on my phone. I'm on the app.
Yeah.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Well, there's your problem.
Yeah, I can't offer any tech support either. So.
What was that?
I cannot offer any tech support. But you guys saw the you may have been in the news. I don't know if you saw it or not, but I put the thing up on the Facebook and shared it with you and whatnot about. This is now the second year in a row that the Obama administration, when Barack O. Carter professed to be the most transparent White House, et cetera, and it turns out that they are the least transparent in all of presidential history.
No, really?
Nobody has been worse. Yeah, nobody has been worse at processing requests for documents than the Obama administration. They've been the worst.
I'll bet you 10 to 1. I can tell you who number 2 was. I bet that was W.
It's not to pick on. Oh yeah, well, it's not to pick on Obama specifically. This is just how it goes, and it gets worse and worse and worse. It's a continuing trend with government saying one thing and doing something else.
Yeah, and it gets worse under every administration, Democrat or Republican. And I just wrote the other day about how destructive the whole left-right dichotomy is, because it just blinds people in so many ways. Like, for example, I have a friend who posted something on Facebook the other day about what it means to be liberal, and it's all about being tolerant and generous, and things like that. And I said, well, and then she commented, "Isn't that wonderful?" I said, well, those words are wonderful, but the reality is most people who identify as liberal these days don't follow those principles. And I think a lot of it is that they're blinded by the whole left-right dichotomy, and that's why they scream bloody murder when Bush Jr. does all these things, but then when Obama does it, they just look the other way, or it must be okay. It's like he's absolved by being a Democrat.
Yeah, well, the other problem is it true? I mean, they'll stand behind something, and turns out that it's horribly abusive or untrue, or you have to pass it before we know what's in it, and the next thing you know, you're getting bent over.
That is the stupidest thing. I mean, the whole, you gotta pass it before you know what's in it. Anybody that does anything like that, and let's be honest. How many of us, when we open up a piece of software, read the user guidelines? How many, or not the user guidelines, the end user license agreement? How many of us do that? How many of us totally read through our insurance policies with a fine-tooth comb? Nobody does. I mean, you might, one or two things, but for the most part, you just ignore all that crap. And I've had this thought just recently about it has to do with my my mental condition with my ADD, and a lot of people have misused the Americans with Disabilities Act, stating that you know, if I don't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in prison, then I'm gonna go crazy or something. You know, stupid stuff like that. And I'm thinking, could I sue the government using the ADA on stating that the way that they write these laws and the lack of transparency, you know, makes it hard for me. It's an impediment to me. It makes me not able to understand what's going on. I mean, you'd think that would be the logical conclusion, right?
Sue everybody. Look, sue everybody. I suffer from depression, and 15 items or fewer makes me depressed. Just sue everybody.
Exactly.
You know, you're onto something, and let me give you an example. I mean, when Bush Sr. signed the ADA, you know, it's one of those things where the name of the bill, you know, makes it, you know, very tough for any politician to speak against, because, you know, the thing is, you know, on the surface, it's like, of course, we all want to help the disabled. I mean, you know, after all, we got handicapped spots, you know, outside of, you know, restaurants and stores, things like that. But here's the thing, you know, as Harry Browne, and he applied this to the civil rights laws, and how they turned in from, you know, equal rights for blacks into, you know, all kinds of nonsense that had nothing to do with the original intent. And, you know, of course, the same thing happened with the ADA. And here's my favorite example. Now, Jim, I know you're not a basketball fan. I don't know about you, Eric, but back in the 80s and 90s, there was an NBA player by the name of Roy Tarpley. And he had 3 substance abuse violations in his first 5 years in the league, and he was kicked out. Then he was reinstated 3 years later, and then 2 years after that, he had another substance abuse violation, and he was banned from the league and never returned. And then several years ago, he sued the NBA on the basis that, you know, they discriminated against him because of his illness, that is drug addiction, and therefore violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the league actually settled out of court with him. So, you know, yeah, I mean, basically, it's like Harry Browne says, you know, anytime you start giving certain protections to certain people, more people want to get in on the aristocracy. Yeah. And, you know, it's like, and you know, the point, you know, Harry Browne applied to with civil rights is like this. He said, you know, basically, okay, you start off with the civil rights laws were protected blacks, but then, you know, you had other races that wanted to get on it. Then, you know, women, gays, you know, transsexuals, you know, other people, and then finally, basically, it's like if you're, as he put it, if you're a white heterosexual male Protestant, and you get bad service or you don't get a job, it must be simply because of, you know, inept service or whatever. But if you're one of these members of the aristocracy, then it must be because you were hated because of whatever, you know, victim group that you belong to.
Yeah.
That's off on a sidetrack, but yeah, you're absolutely correct. And then it all comes down to the whole thing about you know, special rights, and you know, everybody. I believe everybody deserves to not be discriminated against, but I mean, where does that come to? And I don't like the whole notion of special rights, and I don't like how the how religious people you know, try to make marriage a special right for, you know, heterosexuals, when it's just totally you know, government recognition of marriage is just totally a special right, and I don't think anybody should have special rights. If
you want equal rights and equal punishment, that's fine. That makes sense. I want that too. But special rights and special punishment, it's a hate crime. Really? It wasn't a love crime? It's just silly.
Yeah. And you know,
I saw this funny video today, and I should have saved it. I saw it this morning on Facebook. This it's like a collegehumor.com thing, and it was for a new app for your mobile phone. It was called what was it? It was called Am I Racist? And you go around and you get, you know, on the app, every time you open a door for a black person, you click the thing and you get so many points. You date an Asian woman, you click it, you get more points, and then you can network it to see who's the least racist in your family. And it showed the list of all the people in the guy's family, and one of them was negative 200 points. And he goes, Uncle Carl, you got to shape up there. Oh, it was hilarious. It was hilarious parody.
That's good stuff.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to dig that up.
There you go. But look, getting back on the subject, for anyone to listen to that audio clip, remember that's we're making fun of Pelosi and talking about the minimum wage thing from years ago and the healthcare law from things years ago. That wasn't from years ago. That's recent. That's a recent clip. This is new. This is new stuff for her. It added again. That's from the FCC thing.
Mm-hmm.
From the net neutrality. She's like, let's stop worrying about the details of it and just have it. And it's like, come on, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And before you know it, before you know it, as I said, nobody reads those end user license agreements. We don't know what crap is in there. Yeah, there have been some egregious things in there recently. I'm going to look that up real quick. But there have been some egregious stuff in end user license agreements.
It's like the truth in lending form. You get a mortgage and they have to give you this truth in lending form and you have to sign it to get your mortgage completed. And well, you may not have to. There's probably some legal stuff in there that says you don't have to. But and it says, yeah, I read my mortgage contract, and then you sign your name. But I didn't read it. It's 70 pages long, and this guy's sitting here and he wants to go home, and it's like, I didn't read that. Oops.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like if anybody's ever been to a closing to buy a house, you know how that is. Yeah, I mean, it's just an incredibly tedious, boring, process filled with all kinds of technicalities that nobody cares about.
Yeah, I didn't read that. And look, it's not just this. It's on and on and on. I mean, here's an example for you. For those of you that, whether you believe the religion of a catastrophic global warming or not, this is the fourth report. Now, there's been 5 of them, and now they're working on it. It's just ridiculous. And I read the first, I skipped the second, I read the third, read the fourth. Oh, you talk about a boring read. Wow. Anyway, which is why I skipped the second one. And the third one's the most entertaining, by the way. If you want to read any of those, go read the third one. It's hilarious. But so 2007, the fourth report didn't come out until late April, early May. I forget what it was. But they released the summary in February. Now think about that. They published the summary of a report that hasn't been published yet. And then they sent the summary back for a week to edit it further and republish it. And then they still had to finish the report to make it match what the summary said. And then here's how they title these things. I have this written down because there's no way I can remember this. We have the title of the report. IPCC Working Group 1 Contribution to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 4th Assessment Report, Climate Change 2007, the Physical Science Basis. The other there's 2 separate publications. Climate Change 2007, the Physical Science Basis, Summary for Policymakers, Contribution of Working Group 1 to the 4th Assessment Report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is the title. They couldn't just say global warming, period. No, huge title, same words, shift the order around, 2 separate reports. They move the word summary. They do these things on purpose to confuse you. One of them is 18 pages. The next one's 21 pages, published a week later. The actual report was, 1,000 pages and wasn't out until months later. And it's just ridiculous, completely ridiculous. And they just tell you, yeah, this is it. It's real. And World Wildlife Fund says, yeah, we agree. And then that's it. And there's this so-called consensus, which if anyone out there is any kind of scientist, there is no such thing as a scientific consensus. And this so-called consensus is shrinking as people finally go back and read this nonsense, and they go, "Wait a minute, no." So
we were mentioning we're on the topic of these of stuff especially in government where you can't wait until you pass it to see what's in it, and we know that there's a whole ton of hidden stuff in there. We brought up the fact. I brought up the fact about end-user license agreements, and nobody reads those things. I found this article, 10 ridiculous end-user license agreements you probably agreed to. Apple's, this is from the website makeuseof.com. Apple's iTunes EULA expressively forbids you from using iTunes to create missiles and biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons. The you agree that you will not use these products for any purposes prohibited by the United States law, including without limitation the development, design, manufacture, or production of missiles or nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. That is verbatim. I don't know if it's current, but that's verbatim from iTunes and QuickTime license agreement. Safari for Windows. You're not allowed to install it on Windows. And this is in Section 2. This is in Section 2, Paragraph A. This license allows you to install and use one copy of the Apple software on a single Apple-based computer at a time.
Right.
Okay, let's go down to the next one. I haven't read through all of these. Google Chrome. Google owns you. This is it wasn't paying attention to the end-user license agreement when it launched the Chrome web browser. When it was released, the license agreement contained the following clause. You give Google a perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free, and non-exclusive license to reproduce, adapt, modify, translate, publish, publicly perform, publicly display, and distribute any content which you submit, post, or display on or through the services. The game Far Cry 2. Enforced morality. They prevent you from using the game contrary to morality or the laws in force.
Wow.
Let me see here. This is a good one. Microchip. I'm not quite sure what this is. It's Microchip's MPLABX, MPLAB-X. Maybe I think it might be an MP3 converter. Is used to contain the following line in its EULA. I've read this one before. This is great. Microchip's authorized representatives will have the right to reasonably inspect, announced or unannounced, and in its sole and absolute discretion, licensees' premises and to audit licensees' records and inventory of licensees' use of the software, whether located on licensees' premises or elsewhere at any time, in order to ensure licensees' adherence to the terms of this agreement. In other words, and this is quoting the website again, Microchip reserved the right to knock on your door at 3 in the morning and immediately audit you to ensure compliance with this software agreement. PC Pit Stop, $1,000 for free. To prove a point that no one reads EULAs, PC Pit Stop once had the following clause in its license agreement. Special consideration. A special consideration which may include financial compensation will be awarded to a limited number of authorized licensees to read this section of the license agreement and contact PC Pit Stop at consideration at pcpitstop.com. The author can be withdrawn at any time. It took 4 months before someone noticed and claimed the $1,000 prize.
Fantastic. And that shows you that nobody reads this.
Nobody reads them. Microsoft Windows, the OEM restriction retailers ignore. Where is it? Let's say you want to buy a copy of Windows. You might think you could head to Newegg or another retailer and buy one of the popular copies of Windows, but you'd be wrong. Look closely and you'll see the OEM tag on each of these operating systems. OEM means it's for an original equipment manufacturer and can only be installed on one computer. Ever. At one time, Microsoft allowed hobbyists building their own PCs to purchase and install OEM versions of Windows. The actual license agreement no longer allows this, but many Microsoft representatives continue endorsing it. Let me see here. Use of the OEM System Builder channel software is subject to the terms of the Microsoft OEM System Builder license. This is intended for pre-installation on a new personal computer for resale. The OEM System Builder channel software requires users to this image is cut a little bit, to provide end-user support for the Windows software and cannot be transferred to another computer once it's installed. And this is a good one. Sony and EA, no class action lawsuits, but any class action lawsuits are a scam in and of themselves, but that's a topic for another time. Awesome. If you accepted PlayStation Network's new terms and conditions, this article is from 2012, when it updated back in September, you agreed to this. Any dispute resolution proceedings, whether in arbitration or court, will be conducted only on an individual basis and not in a class or representative action. In other words, by agreeing to this mandatory update, you signed away your rights to a class action lawsuit, if that's legally possible. You can opt out by sending a physical letter to Sony, something just inconvenient enough that very few people will do it, if they even read the EULA in the first place. Oh, and the EULA for EA's origin includes the same language. And what's this? Okay, all over the place. Only one backup copy. Oh, this is multiple ones. Many end-user license agreements stipulate that you may only have one backup copy. Do you use a backup program like Apple's Time Machine or Windows Backup? You could be violating several end-user license agreements. Practically everywhere, the end-user license agreement may change at any time. Many EULAs reserve the right to change at any time, so it doesn't really matter what the EULA says when you read it. I hope you're periodically monitoring the terms of use of every website you use, since they all expect you to. Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yeah, and this, look, this goes on and on. It leads into a similar thing. Illinois' eavesdropping law. Look, here in Illinois, we talked about it a little bit before. There's this process. A bill has to be read 3 times, and it comes up for vote. That's the way the process goes. But as long as that bill number goes through the process, then it counts. And it's the argument that I make that it really doesn't matter who the Speaker of the House is. People vote for Rauner just because they think they're going to be able to get rid of Madigan. Well, no, and that didn't work anyway. But the eavesdropping law, it began its life going into compiled statute section 730. It amends the Department of Juvenile Justice Morality Review Team Act. Provides that each morality review team shall consist of 1 member, blah, blah, blah. But then they amended it. And the amendment says, strikes everything and replaces it with this. It's already on the calendar. It's already coming through for vote. It's already been read. And then they just amend it and pass it before the deadline, before the end of the year, whatever deadline they're trying to meet. And they just change the law. It doesn't matter who the speaker is and what the calendar has on it and who sets it. Just change the law before you get around to passing it. It's ridiculous. They do whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want.
I do whatever I want. To quote Eric Cartman. It is ridiculous. And they and then we brought up before. I mean, you could have a bill that looks like really, really good on the outset, like who wouldn't want to feed the starving children? Who wouldn't want to school lunches and that sort of thing? That's all good stuff. Violent. And then at the end of it, they'll tack on an amendment to saying, making it mandatory for every person in the state to kick a puppy twice a day. And then you vote against it, and then your opponent can use the thing, well, he voted against school lunches.
Yeah, and it's my favorite. The Violence Against Women Act is my favorite act. A favorite high-profile bill recently that had such a misleading name, and that was often used to demagogue against people who opposed it, as if we supported violence against women. And of course, I always pointed out, for anybody who isn't already aware, that violence against women is already a crime in all 50 states. So therefore, this bill would do nothing to make any woman safer.
Well, again, special rights and special punishment isn't violence against anybody. I mean, most states have a law with violence against animals. Isn't that already? You have to have a specific violence against women because somehow women are exempt.
Yeah, and of course, my favorite example also when it comes to the need for so-called hate crimes. I mean, because the two high-profile murders that are always mentioned are Matthew Shepard, the gay man in Wyoming, who was murdered about 16 years ago, and then James Byrd, the black man in Texas, who was murdered at about the same time. Well, people made a big deal that Wyoming and Texas didn't have hate crimes. Well, let's look at what happened without hate crimes. For anyone who doesn't know, murder happens to be a crime in both Wyoming and Texas. The 2 men who killed Matthew Shepard got life without parole, which is the maximum sentence, since Wyoming is a non-death penalty state. And of the 3 men who killed James Byrd, 2 got the death penalty, and the 3rd got life without parole. Now, I'm against the death penalty, but the point is they didn't need hate crime laws to prosecute those murders.
Right. And that's, go ahead. If you're carjacking somebody or holding up the gas station or whatever, but if you use a racial slur, now it's a hate crime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And once again, another topic we can get in. We could do a whole episode on that whole thing. But I mean, it's just the fact of the matter. You vote against the school lunch bill because You know, you don't want to kick puppies. Or even reverse it. Reverse it. A bill's introduced into Congress stating, making it mandatory that everybody kick a puppy twice a day. And then they tack on a school lunch thing. And you vote for that, well, suddenly you like kicking puppies.
Yeah, well, that becomes the thing. The Republican versus Democrat TV ads. You know, one's like, oh, he was against, you know, kids in school lunches, and then the opponent's like, he likes kicking puppies. You know, you just
a quick note here. None of us like or believe in kicking puppies. Just throwing that out. We're libertarians. We don't believe in puppy kicking.
Standard disclaimer. You know, Leck, you brought up an interesting thing because it's just in the news a couple of days ago. We finally have a prosecutor down in Texas going to jail for handling a case badly, and here's a guy that executed and turns out to be innocent. I mean, I'm for the death penalty, but I wrestle with it for reasons just like that. How many innocent, you know, do get killed or are scheduled to be? So I really have to wrestle with that. I think, you know, I'm.
Did you hear what that guy's punishment was? Did you hear what his punishment was? He got disbarred and 10 days in jail.
Yeah.
God.
I think.
So it was a step in the right direction, but it was nowhere close to where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think death row. You're a nefarious prosecutor. You do this just for the sake of a conviction, and you get an innocent man executed. You go to death row.
Yeah, no kidding.
If I supported the death penalty, I would support that. Yeah, and you know, and certainly, you know, it would be poetic justice if that did happen. And
I'm not necessarily a big believer in eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but if you are a prosecutor and you sent an innocent man to jail or sent an innocent man to death row, you should have the fear of having the same punishment if you found out that you effed with the system just to get, you know, make your numbers up so that you could put in your damn political ads that I'm tough on crime. Look at this poor black man who actually hurt nobody, but I sent him to jail.
Making mistakes and convincing a jury, that's one thing, but when it's deliberate, when you know that evidence that exonerates this person is being withheld on purpose just so you can get a conviction, that's a crime, man.
Yeah, that's premeditated murder by definition.
It is.
Yeah, you know what? You are absolutely correct, Leck. I never really thought about it, but you are absolutely 100% correct. If you're just trying to inflate your numbers and put somebody on death row, and then they get executed, and it turns out later that they were innocent, that was premeditated murder. You're 100% correct. Never thought about it that way before.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to, the point I've been trying to drive home when discussing that case. And you know, another thing that should be noted, I saw a quote, and I don't know if either of you know anything about this, but I always, when I see a quote attributed to someone that's particularly damning, I like to verify it, that it's not taken out of context, or that.
Exactly.
But do you? I read a quote from Rick Perry, who was the governor of Texas at the time, that this guy was executed and who denied a stay of execution. Do you all know about him making any comment at a debate about that execution?
Not off the top of my head.
I read a very damning quote about it that was attributed to him, but like I just want to make sure that he actually said it and that it's not taken out of context before.
Yeah, I can't tell you.
Okay, but yeah, I know that basically this quote portrayed him as having no remorse about that, but I don't know that he actually said it, so I'm not going to actually state the, because we don't know, but I do think that nevertheless things like that are a natural product of people who are very aggressive about the death penalty. And of course Texas, obviously one of the biggest the biggest death penalty state, along with Florida, so as I know that out of context, like for example, I remember of course I was a big Ron Paul supporter in 2012, and I saw some awful out of context quotes of his, basically, like for example, somebody dismissed his So somebody to justify his disagreement with to justify his support for
several years ago, he sued
abolishing
the NBA on the basis.
Sorry about that.
Oh, what I was going to say is that basically
levels.
because Ron Paul opposed FEMA, somebody attributed a quote to him about the hurricane that it was just basically it was 4 or 5 words out of a answer of hundreds of words that was just used to make him sound like he doesn't care about hurricane victims. Of course, is not at all the case.
Right,
well,
right.
Kanye said that George Bush doesn't care about black people. Must be true.
Yeah, must be true.
Yeah. And it's like the whole thing that Jim, I know you respond to it. I don't remember if you did, Eric, but that utterly ridiculous post about some guy used to justify the claim that vaccines cause autism, like the number of vaccines that were used in 1983 and the number of autism diagnoses then compared to now, as if that means that it's as if that vaccines therefore must be the cause of autism. I mean, it's like you could say, it's like saying that home video players are the cause of autism, since after all the advent of the home video revolution coincides with
there was a great chart.
It's part of
the chart I saw a while back. If you think vaccines cause autism, then you have the same chart showed a rise in autism when we started the space program. The space program causes autism.
It's a part of the scientific method. Part of the scientific method. Correlation is not causation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a term called falsifiability. There's falsifiability. If I can find a way to make this statistic lie, then it's not true. I have to be able to disprove all of the falsehoods first before you can say this is fact. And that's the problem with those sort of things, and people do it all the time. Look, the seatbelt law, as mandatory seatbelt laws go into effect, they go, look, the number of crash fatalities is down. Yeah, and all the cars have airbags. Right about the same time the seatbelt laws went in. Oops, it doesn't. They probably do save lives, but you can't attribute one with the other because there's another piece going on.
Yeah, and I do think people should wear their seatbelts. I certainly always wear mine, but it's. I think seatbelts are certainly have saved some lives, but they're not the only cause. I mean, there's the airbags, and there are other factors as well. That cars are just made safer, And as far as autism, I mean, the thing is, I had never heard of autism until the movie Rain Man came out. I'd never heard that word before, and then. My son was diagnosed, 4 years ago, and as was I shortly afterward. And obviously, I was born before 1983, and I was vaccinated, and so, but with only the things that they vaccinated against back then. But the point is that the reason that autism diagnosis has gone up so much isn't because autism is more prevalent. It's because awareness of autism is more prevalent.
Well, there's that. There's the number of ways that we measure it, and if you look at other related things, how many people today are being diagnosed as retarded? No, we specify, and so these the specifics are increasing, and we go, look, the autism's on the rise. Well, yeah, but the generic mental retardation plummeting like a rock. But you don't hear that.
Not a term I like, but I understand it. But anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I know a girl, for example, who was when she was a child, they thought she was just a weirdo, and they put her in the special ed class, and then later, as a young adult, she found out that she actually has Asperger's syndrome, and then after that, she went to college.
Right, and that's just it, how we diagnose it. They talk about, cancer is on the rise. Well, yeah, but we're really good at detecting it now compared to what we were just 1 year ago, let alone 10 or 20.
And there are lots of people from the past who now are, it's widely believed to have had autism. A lot of people think Thomas Jefferson had it. And from what I've read about him, he probably did have some form of it. Stanley Kubrick, the great film director, he almost certainly had it based on the things I've read about him.
Yeah, all kinds of
there are
stuff.
just so many examples. Yeah, and it just that they didn't know what it was. People just thought that they were weird back then, and without understanding there's a method to the madness. So, I mean, it's just one thing after another. The people are, they just base their opinions on such shallow things without any, scientific basis. And, there are lots of conditions, that have strong spikes in diagnosis simply because, like you said, sometimes the basis for diagnosing things changes dramatically, and sometimes people just become aware.
Yeah, my sister has a kid with some learning trouble, and she was talking about the same thing. It's like the reason why you might correlate that to getting a vaccination is because shortly after he's vaccinated, the things start to show up. That's because that's about the age when that stuff happens. It wasn't cause and effect. It's just a matter of the calendar.
Right. Yeah, and it's just you think that over time, I mean, it's a natural result of time when medical research is done, and new things are discovered that these kinds of things change, and autism has always been around. Like one of these people actually defended the vaccinations cause autism garbage by talking about how this guy knows he says that he doesn't know of a single Amish person with autism, and the Amish of course don't vaccinate. Well, did it ever occur to him that that there are probably lots of autistic Amish who've just never been diagnosed? And I'm sure there are.
Now, the big question here is, how do we tie this back to Nancy Pelosi?
I don't know. We probably can.
I don't know. Yeah, I know. We tend to get sidetracked, and like I said, we are after all the side project, so it's natural we do get sidetracked from time to time.
Yeah.
But
which actually is a symptom of autism or ADD and stuff.
I don't know. Look, if you're not, well, I don't know how you tie back, and it's kind of, now we're taking a U-turn. But look, just like you're reading this stuff in the end-user license agreement, people don't read that. You think your legislators read this bill or that bill, thousands of pages long, and all the references it makes to the already existing code? No, they voted on the summary, they voted on what the speaker or whomever told them it was about, and that's it. And they left it at that.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way: if you get say you get a novel, Stephen King novel, whatever, and you read the little screed on the flap, you can't say that you read the novel. But that's what they're doing in Congress and what they're doing with the laws. It's the same damn thing.
Yeah, and of course, you look at how many hours there are in a day. You look at how many bills these people vote on, and literally there is not enough time in a day for them to do it. It's not humanly possible, even if you're a speed reader.
6,000. Just in Illinois, 6,000 pieces of legislation, just and on and on and on and on. No, they did not read it all. They could not read it all.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that happened at my last place of employment. I worked in technical support. We had to take notes or whatever, and if something didn't, if somebody couldn't resolve the situation, they moved it up, the support ladder. It happened to be up on the support ladder, but we got a call transferred over to us, and the support notes were, tried many things, nothing worked. Every bill that gets passed by Congress should just be, tried many things, nothing worked. Label it the Food Safety Act, and then, hey, we'll hammer out the details later. We've tried many things, nothing worked.
Yeah, here, just an example. March 21st of the year, we're in the 99th General Assembly here in Illinois. It's only been, 3 months, and there are 2,100 Senate bills and almost 4,200 House bills.
Wow.
Yeah, they read them all. They read them all and they know what's in there.
And when we go to court, and we say that, well, we didn't know it was illegal to eat apples on Tuesday. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorance of the law is a perfect excuse for Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And just another example. It's the one thing that sums it all up. Well, I saw a list several years ago about the long list of laws that Congress at that time had exempted itself from. And the minimum wage is one of them, of course. But the one that's the most appropriate was the Ethics in Government Act.
Irony.
Oh man! And it goes on and on and on. And when someone finally takes somebody to task, they're either ignored or made fun of or ostracized. I mean, I remember the President Obama's the healthcare powwow, and he invited representatives from both parties, because of course nobody else could possibly have any opinion on that. And they're sitting at the table, and kudos to the Republicans in this case, because they're like, Mr. President, what about the so-and-so clause, and what about this thing over here, and I want to talk about this element. And and the president's response was, well, that's not why we're here. We don't have time to debate those things. Well, no, that is why we're here. We showed up to this debate because that's what a debate is. I mean, it's why we're here.
Penn Jillette once said the most important thing written in the Constitution. It's in pretty much all of the amendments. It's pretty much in every one of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course Harry Brown had a great response to that on his Constitution Day article, which I often post on Facebook every year on Constitution Day, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, and you probably don't, it's September 17th. But anyway, yeah, he said that basically now people act like, when the Constitution says Congress shall make no law, it doesn't mean that Congress shall make no law. It just means that the government must have compelling interest to do something. And
if the government wants compelling interest, it will find compelling interest.
Well, of course, yeah. And one of my favorite examples, getting back to the whole thing about sneaking stuff into bills, do you all remember that so-called crime bill that passed back in 1994? It was one of Clinton's crown jewels. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, it was of course, the thing is, the bill was filled with pork and and one of the thing that got the most publicity was the thing that the conservatives harped on the most was that there was a $40 million provision to set up midnight basketball leagues.
I remember that.
But supposedly to keep kids away from crime, and that was bad enough. But there was another thing in there that got very little publicity. But there was a guy in Congress, I don't remember who he was, but he was a graduate of Lamar University, which is in some small town in Texas.
Lamar Luttrell.
Yeah, and he oh, okay. I just realized what that was a reference to. Okay.
Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah, when they were.
Okay. Anyway.
but anyway, so there was a guy who was a graduate of Lamar University, and he had a clause put in there that gave, I think, a $10 million grant to an unnamed school in this town in Texas, and I think Lamar was the only college in town. So basically, he gave a $10 million grant to his alma mater without even mentioning it by name in a so-called crime bill.
The healthcare law with its tax subsidy or whatever it is, a tax break for New Orleans.
Hell, I mean, you look at any of the budget bills, and then they're like sneaking stuff in there, hoping that we're not paying attention. There was I don't remember the specifics, but there was in one of the bills there was a couple of $1 million set aside for a tropical rainforest auditorium or whatever, where they can simulate a tropical rainforest or what, like Florida with palm trees and everything, in Iowa.
Yeah.
Because they need palm trees in Iowa. Well, actually, I can see that, but still.
Well, some of the stuff is obvious. I remember it's been a number of years now, 10 or more. Illinois had a thing where they were going to subsidize city of Waukegan. We're going to give them like 30 grand, and who cares? That's nothing compared to what they spend on all kinds of stuff. But all these things add up. They gave them like $30,000 to build a statue of Jack Benny, and it's like, really? Why should the taxpayers across the state pay for such nonsense? And it's what they do, and you'll see it on the floor.
And they always sneak the real egregious stuff in the budget bills, and they're thinking that we won't notice it. If we get crap like this Ileana toll road that they're trying to build, and it's the road is a road to nowhere. It's way too far south to be effective. It needs to be at least 15 miles further north, and it's going right by a new unit of the National Forest Service, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?"
The whole thing is a dog and pony show. Look, all this get out the vote campaigns, and you guys probably heard about the president's proposal to make voting mandatory.
Let's have stupider people vote.
Mandatory. Yeah, let's get people that thank you for not voting, who are completely uninformed and choose not to because they don't want to be involved in it. Great. Now we're going to make it mandatory and force them to show up to vote. Well, we're not going to, but that's the idea. But look, here's the thing: they have to get out to vote. I look at my sample ballot for my area here, and I've got coming up in the spring we've got county board and stuff like that.
Oh, that's our 5-minute.
Yeah, and you've got offices, school board, and you have 3 candidates. A thing says vote for 3, and there's only 2 running. Or vote for no more than 2, and there's only 1 person running. Yeah, get out the vote.
Sometimes the most responsible vote is no vote at all.
People running unopposed, they only have to show up to the poll.
Yeah, and the thing is, we're not advocating.
Yeah, they show up to the poll, they vote for themselves.
Yeah, we're not advocating,
not running unopposed. Then we have, big, get out the vote campaigns. It's ridiculous. And then
Illinois might be moving to the top 2 primary system, where only the top 2 people placed in the primary will get on the general election ballot, making it even harder for third parties to get on.
Yeah,
California already does it. California has already basically shut down the Green and Libertarian parties by doing it.
And by the way, do you know, Jim, what the original intent of that system was?
I do not.
Okay, good. I'm glad I get the opportunity to present it here. And it should be no coincidence that most of the states that have that system are in the Deep South. And the thinking was that it was a way to keep blacks out of office. Like, for example, let's say there were, about 100 years ago, let's say there were 7 or 8 candidates on the ballot, and all but one were white. And they're assuming that every black person is going to vote for the black candidate, and therefore he would get a plurality of the vote. But by doing it that way, it would almost guarantee that no black would ever get elected, because once, let's say the black got the plurality, then if he ran against the top white candidate, then almost every white person would vote, for that candidate in the runoff. So, it's just another example, just like I've pointed out before on the show, how the whole point of the minimum wage was to make blacks unemployable. I mean, it's just amazing that, now so many blacks fall for things that were designed in the beginning to hold them back and still have that effect.
That's funny.
I'm throwing this out there real quick. A couple of years ago, we had Brian Dunning of Skeptoid on the show, and he had an episode of his podcast. It's episode number 281, called "The Science of Voting: Are Democratic Elections Actually as Free and Fair as We Think They Are?" So you might want to go there. Only 15 minutes of your time. You might want to head over there and check it out.
I'll make a note of that. Look, here's the other thing too. Local, your city and county elections. One of the things they try to do here is sneak stuff onto the off elections. They have the April and sometimes even March and February crazy election schedules, special elections where people don't show up, and that's where they put the referendum to spend $1 bazillion to build a new whatever that nobody wants. Really? You're going to make voting mandatory? They don't want that.
And with that, we need to kind of wrap it up here. I just want to remind everybody that you can find our show on iTunes. We're on Radio Fubar Live every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Central. And if you like us on Facebook and circle us on Google+, you'll get a link to the video feed. We are on the TuneIn app on the smartphone, tablet, or Roku box. You can search either Side Project Live if you want to just hear us, or you can hear us once again live on Radio Fubar if you do a search for them. And we are on Stitcher on your smartphone every Sundays at noon. That's Central. We are on Tuiville at tuiville.com, TOUHYVILLE.com. And I did not put it on this list, but we are on the podcast feed on LRN.FM. And I want to make a special announcement real quick. We are having a special month of shows in May. We're going to be doing stuff about mental illness. So if you have any stories that you would like to send us or any questions or whatever, you can email us at contrarysoul@gmail.com. So there's that coming up. So once again, from Morris, Illinois, this is Jim Goebel.
Lockport, Illinois, Eric Ferguson. Hi there. Your turn, Lock. Did we lose him?
I think we lost him. Oh.
And from Indiana.
There he is.
And from Indianapolis, that was Leck fading in and out. But we'll see you all again. See you all again next week, and it'll be anything can happen Saturday. So we'll see you all then.
Indeed.